Hello and welcome. You're watching UTV Live at 6. Our top stories. The Taoiseach announces plans for an accelerated reopening of Ireland by July the 20th.
Cabinet today agreed to implement all elements of Phase 2 and move further along the roadmap. A Phase 2 plus, if you like.
Will that decision increase pressure to further ease lockdown here? We'll hear from the First and Deputy First Ministers who, while speaking with one voice on coronavirus, are now at loggerheads over the victims' pension issue.
I think it's grotesque that the Stormont House Agreement hasn't been implemented. I think it's grotesque that we haven't successfully dealt with the legacy of the past and brought forward the measures which were agreed almost 6 years ago.
Also tonight, shock in Banbridge and Portadown as the reality of 500 job losses at Thompson Aero Seating sink in.
We had reservations that there was problems coming, but I don't think anyone anticipated the scale of 500 potential redundancies, so that came as a shock, but obviously bitter disappointment for staff, their families.
Plus, Altnagelvin Hospital marks a COVID success story as the last patient leaves an intensive care unit that has had a 100% survival rate.
And as the winds are picking up today, will it stay windy through the weekend? Well, join me shortly for the full details of your weather.
Good evening. There was good news for people living in the Republic, with the Taoiseach announcing today that he's accelerating the roadmap out of lockdown. Leo Varadkar says he is reducing the Irish Government's 5-point plan to 4, and it will mean most of the restrictions will be lifted by July 20th. Well, among the measures announced today, shops to reopen from Monday. Groups of 6 people will be allowed to meet indoors, while 15 people can meet outdoors. On June 29th, the entire hospitality and tourism sector will reopen, including hotels and caravan parks. Bars serving food will also be allowed to open with table service only. Then hairdressers and nail bars will open on July 20th.
Thanks to your perseverance in pushing back COVID-19, I'm also announcing an acceleration of the roadmap. Based on the medical evidence and the recommendations from NEFET and government reports on the economic and social impact of COVID-19, Cabinet today agreed to implement all elements of Phase 2 and move further along the roadmap. A Phase 2 plus, if you like. We've also agreed to bring forward actions in the remaining phases. So there will now just be 4 phases rather than 5. Phase 3 is starting on the 29th of June and Phase 4 on the 20th of July, with a 3-week interval as previously planned.
Well, the Taoiseach says he has outlined his plans to the First and Deputy First Ministers. Shortly, I'll be speaking to Arlene Foster in Fermanagh. But first, let's hear from Michelle O'Neill. I spoke to her a short time ago and started by asking her what impact the new arrangements south of the border may have up here.
We had a call with the Taoiseach at lunchtime where we talked about the measures which they are going to bring forward over the course of the next days and weeks. It's important that we continue to be as joined up as we can be across the island. We know that the disease is spreading in the same way across the island. So we had a good conversation around all of those things, and clearly we as an executive continue to keep all of our measures under review, and we want to be able to get to the same point as quickly as possible, and that we're able to make some more relaxations and allow people that wee bit more freedom, which they obviously really want right now.
Because a lot of businesses would be concerned that they don't have the certainty that the Taoiseach is now affording those south of the border. That will hugely impact businesses here in Northern Ireland.
Well, I mean, I strive every day to give people certainty. I want to make sure that they have all the information at hand, that they're able to plan for opening up whenever they're able to open up. We obviously have had this phased approach. We've had a strategy that's working. We have been able to be somewhat successful in terms of keeping the virus spread down, and I'm delighted about that. But we have to also be very careful and chart our way through this as best we can. We as an executive continue to keep all these things under review. That's our promise to the public and to the business community, and we know the certainty that people are seeking, and we strive to get that certainty to them, and we'll continue to do that. And our next obviously meeting is the executive meeting on Monday, where we discuss all of those things again.
Sorry to cut across you. Let's be realistic here. I mean, you are close to the border in Strabane at the moment. You could walk across the border and have a pint or a glass of wine, but yet here in Northern Ireland you can't do that sort of thing.
Well, what the Taoiseach has said today is that they will be opening at some stage in July, that they'll be able to move towards doing those things over the course of the next number of weeks with very strong guidance. We have obviously given a date for our hospitality sector. We have also said that we're going to work up guidance around all of these things as well. So I hope we can get to that point very quickly, Mark, where we're able to give that certainty and actually give the green light to be able to go forward in all of this.
Okay.
We have to remember we are still in the public health emergency.
At the start of this pandemic, you were very adamant that we should be following the advice that Dublin was getting and therefore affecting their lockdown. What do you make of it now?
I never advocated following what Dublin were doing. I was saying that we needed to suit our own people. We needed to make sure that we didn't follow the British system. That was my criticism at the start, because it was not reflecting our own needs here on this island. What I want to do is continue for us to have an all-island joined-up approach. Okay. I welcome the fact that we had the discussion with the Taoiseach earlier, and then we keep all these things under review. The Executive will meet again on Monday. We will discuss the developments in the 26 counties, and we will look towards where we can align things here also.
Okay, Michelle O'Neill, I want to move on. So far the Executive has spoken with one voice on the issue of the coronavirus, but we have an issue that is arising that has the potential to cause massive disruption, and that is the victims' pensions. The issue here, Sinn Féin say, is money. If the money was available, would you back the scheme?
Well, there's more than the money is the issue. Firstly, let me say this, Mark, I want all victims to receive a pension. They have been waiting for far too long. It's absolutely disgraceful that they've had to wait this long. It was actually, in fact, Sinn Féin who argued for, in terms of the Stormont House Agreement legislation consultation, which the British government brought forward, it was us who argued for the pension to be included in that. So I want to work to the point where we are actually able to pay this pension out. These people have waited for far, far too long.
Your party is refusing to choose which department should administer this scheme. Marlene Foster, your colleague in government, calls that grotesque. What do you say to that?
I think it's grotesque that the Stormont House Agreement hasn't been implemented. I think it's grotesque that we haven't successfully dealt with the legacy of the past and brought forward the measures which were agreed almost 6 years ago. I want to get to the point where we deal with legacy in its entirety. I certainly do not want to burden future generations with the past. We need to deal with it in order to allow people to heal the wounds of the past and actually for people to be supported. That's my determination as a political leader. Okay. I want to see the full implementation of all of these things with immediate effect.
Okay, Michelle O'Neill, Deputy First Minister, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us this evening. Thank you. Well, listening to that, the First Minister, Marlene Foster, who joins me now live from County Fermanagh. A very good evening to you. On the issue of victims' pensions, you are saying Sinn Féin is to blame, but the bottom line is, on the issue of funding, your party is not prepared to cough up the money.
Well, I don't think it's for us to cough up the money. As you know, this is not just a victims' pension payment for people living in Northern Ireland. There are many people who served here from our army and security services during the years of the Troubles who now live on the mainland. They are entitled to that pension as well. And therefore, there is a need for us to engage with Treasury to make sure that there is a balanced way forward and that we work together to make sure that this pension becomes a reality. This pension is legal, it's in place, and therefore there's a legal duty to get on and deliver this pension. But
of course, while this argument between the two parties rumbles on, those most in need, those victims that you mentioned there, are left in limbo. You are the First Minister. How are you going to solve this?
Well, I'm solving it by encouraging Sinn Féin to sign the designation to the Department of Justice so that we can move ahead and plan for the pension payments to be made. If Sinn Féin decide that they are not going to do that, if they're not going to designate that department, then we must look to our own government to step in and do something in relation to that, because after all, this is a legislative programme that came to us from Westminster, and therefore there is an imperative that the Secretary of State and others work with us to make sure that it becomes a reality.
OK, let's move to the coronavirus crisis. And the Taoiseach has effectively announced the mass reopening of Ireland by the end of the month. What impact do you see this having on the plan to emerge from lockdown here?
Well, as you know, Mark, we set forward our plan, which is a flexible plan. I think when we announced it back on the 12th of May, that people didn't expect us then a couple of days later to step into step one, and that's just what we did. We will be flexible, and we will work with our scientific and medical advisors to make sure that we do what is right for Northern Ireland and for the people of Northern Ireland. I think it's wonderful news tonight to hear that Altnagelvin Hospital hasn't had one death in relation to COVID-19. That's something to celebrate, and therefore we need to move forward in a way that is beneficial for the people of Northern Ireland, and that's certainly what I intend to do.
And of course we will pick up on that story later in the programme, but there are concerns, Arlene Foster, and you must admit that your party calls itself the party of business. So what are you going to do to help those businesses that will no doubt be adversely affected by Ireland pressing ahead with leaving lockdown, especially those around the border?
Well, I think it's very disappointing that there was no prior consultation or discussion around this announcement today from the Republic of Ireland's government. We received a call after Cabinet had taken their decision. There's been little discussion between our medical advisors as well. I've just come from a meeting with our Chief Medical Advisor and with the Chief Scientific Advisor. I think there should have been more discussion around all of that, but whatever about all of that, we must do what is right for the people of Northern Ireland and for the business community of Northern Ireland, and we want to be flexible in our plan. That's why there are no dates on that plan. For some, they have found that intensely frustrating. For others, they find that flexibility welcome. And on Monday again, we will be looking at all of these issues and engaging with our Chief Medical Officer, having that strategic discussion about what is right for the people and for the business community here in Northern Ireland.
First Minister, you are surely aware of how some people are not adhering to the restrictions that remain in place, and we're hearing this evening that the R number in England has actually gone up. How concerned are you about the weeks ahead?
Well, that is a warning to us that there are parts of England that are at 1 now. I think that is something that we should take note of. I have been concerned about some of the activities that have been going on in relation to people coming together in groups much larger than the 6 that are allowed under the law. And people need to be sensible. They need to use their common sense. They need to socially distance, and they need to continue to have good hand hygiene. All of those things are sensible. We have been successful in Northern Ireland in keeping COVID-19 under control. Let's keep doing that. Let's step forward together in partnership as a government and as a people so that we can make sure that we make this a success. OK, First Minister Arlene Foster, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this evening. Well, the number of coronavirus-related deaths here has fallen for the 5th week in a row. The Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency says that up until last Friday, there were 36 COVID-19 deaths, 11 fewer than at the same time the week previous. In the week ending the 29th of May, NISRA recorded 757 deaths. That's over 200 more than what was reported by the Department of Health on that day. Care home residents account for over half of those deaths, 328 in that setting, with the remainder in hospital. Meanwhile, the number of deaths recorded by the Department of Health has increased by 1 in the last 24 hours, bringing the total to 536. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Michael McBride. Well, people watching this evening will be aware, as I'm sure you are, Dr. McBride, of the changes being made south of the border. Certainly, while not asking you for political comment, do you envisage there being any change to the medical advice here?
Well, there already has been changes here and further relaxation to the regulations coming in on Monday. Now, obviously, it's for each jurisdiction to determine what pace and what speed we progress, depending on how the virus is behaving in each jurisdiction. I would add that our executive did not put a time frame against the various phases and stages of our recovery plan, so therefore we can move as quickly or as slowly as the virus is being transmitted in the community. Now, that's all down to you and I. This virus doesn't spread itself, we spread it. So if we keep to the advice, stick to the social distancing, then we will allow the executive to make decisions that allow us all to move forward more quickly.
The Deputy First Minister earlier in the programme confirmed that the virus is behaving in the same way north and south of the border. And we got news yesterday that the R figure is under control. Do you expect that to continue?
Well, as I've said, that is determined by what we do. If we practice social distancing and again understand that that has been challenged and people have been locked down for quite some time and have found freedoms that they had taken away from them. So it's really important that we stick to the advice on social distancing, that we stick to the advice on hand washing and respiratory hygiene. So, you know, the answer to this lies in all of our hands. It's what you and I do that will make the difference as to whether we see a surge or increase in transmission of the virus or not.
Okay, well, if I could just pick up on one of those points that you made there, social distancing. This issue has been raised with some people suggesting that it should be reduced to 1 metre rather than the current 2. What would your recommendation be?
I think the answer is not at this time. We know that 2 metres is more effective than 1 metre. It could be, however, that when we see transmission reduce further in the community, that we may well be able to reduce that distance safely to 1 metre. But it isn't at this time. But as I say, we keep this situation under continuous review, as we keep all the evidence under continuous review.
What about the issue of masks? Is that under continuous review? Of course, the UK is now deeming them to be compulsory on public transport from the 15th. What has changed there?
Well, the science has not changed. The executive considered this back on the 6th of May and recommended the use of face coverings, particularly in those environments where people find it difficult to socially distance. So that would be in the main and public transport, in some retail outlets and some other circumstances. But we need to bear in mind also that we do not have the same scale or volume of public transport in Northern Ireland as compared to London. And a part of this, I have no doubt, is also due down to public confidence and also the confidence of workers in this sector and industry. And I know our Minister for Infrastructure has been closely examining this and has been in discussion with the Chief Scientific Advisor.
Okay, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Michael McBride, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us this evening. Thank you. The PSNI has appealed to Black Lives Matter organisers not to protest over the weekend. Assistant Chief Constable Alan Todd said while the service supports their right to protest, there are public health risks posed by public gatherings. More bad news on the jobs front. Bombardier, one of Northern Ireland's largest manufacturers, is cutting thousands from its workforce, mainly in Canada, but it's feared it will have a knock-on effect here. And 500 workers are facing redundancy at a Portadown company aligned to the aerospace sector. Barbara McCann reports.
It's an industry that was already under pressure. Now Bombardier plans to reduce its global workforce by 2,500. The aerospace company said the majority of the jobs will be in Canada, but it's still worrying news for the thousands of workers here. In a statement, Bombardier said it was reviewing its Northern Ireland operations. It hasn't said anything more, but workers will be fearing the worst. The news comes a day after Portadown-based Thomson Aero Seating said 500 jobs were at risk. A decision it said was regrettable but unavoidable. The news was not unexpected, but still a severe blow to the workers.
We had reservations that there was problems coming, but I don't think anyone anticipated the scale of 500 potential redundancies. So that came as a shock, but obviously bitter disappointment for the staff, their families.
The MP for the area wants the government to give special attention to the aerospace sector, given the impact of COVID-19.
Well, this is a devastating blow. It's a devastating economic blow to the local area and indeed to Northern Ireland. Obviously, many of the workers come from all over Northern Ireland, so our thoughts are very much with those who have received this news and who are pending a job loss. Obviously, 500 is a significant number, and we very much must intervene and try to assist where we can. I will be speaking with the factory later today. And I've been also speaking with the Economy Minister, who has asked her department to look and see if there's anything that can be done.
Because of an ongoing order, staff have missed out on the government's furlough scheme. One local assembly member thinks that is unacceptable.
If the furlough scheme has to change to retain these jobs, then it has to change. The economic rule book of old had to be ripped up when COVID-19 came in. It has to be rewritten. Part of that has to be ensuring that well-skilled jobs are retained for when the bounce back comes back. And this is a classic example of when the airline industry turns around again, these jobs will be needed.
The potential for job losses isn't unexpected given the current state of the aerospace industry. It remains to be seen how deep any cuts will be in the weeks and months ahead. Barbara McCann, UTV Live, Portadown.
Well, businesses in Northern Ireland say they need more detail about how trade will flow across the Irish Sea when the Brexit transition period ends in 6 months' time. It comes as the latest round of trade deal talks between the UK and EU have ended, with Michel Barnier saying there has been no significant progress. Vicky Hawthorne reports.
How trade flows between Great Britain and Northern Ireland is due to change in 6 months' time when the Brexit transition period ends. But the fine details are still being thrashed out in negotiations. Business groups here say they need those details as soon as possible.
We're looking at a lot of changes about how we move goods between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, and that's going to take staff development, IT systems and training. So what we're asking for is an implementation period. It's given companies that breathing space. They're already under enough pressure with the whole COVID pandemic, so we just need that extra period of time just to prepare and put in place the procedures to make sure goods move seamlessly across the Irish Sea.
Last month, the government admitted more checks on some goods travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland would be needed. That's despite the Prime Minister famously telling businesses here last year they could put documents for checks in the bin. The latest round of trade negotiations between the UK and EU ended earlier today. The UK said progress had been limited and talks needed to intensify. The EU also said there had been no significant progress, and that included the issues affecting Northern Ireland.
There are still a lot of details to be settled if we want to move from aspiration to operation, in line with the legal treaty. Furthermore, some of the objectives set out in this common paper, such as avoiding exit declarations on goods moving from Northern Ireland to Great Britain, are incompatible with the legal commitments accepted by the UK in the protocol. So, we really need to work more on the technical details.
Michel Barnier also acknowledged a paper put together by Northern Ireland business groups to list their key questions on how things will work from the 1st of January. The Northern Ireland Business Brexit Working Group says it also hasn't had much engagement with the government, and that needs to change. Businesses here say that even if a trade deal is struck soon, they will need time to adjust to the changes. Meanwhile, the government insists it will not ask for an extension to the current transition period. It has until the end of the month to change its mind. But Brexit negotiations do tend to rumble on, so it could well be the autumn before there's any real progress. Vicky Hawthorne, UTV Live, Belfast.
Well, still to come this evening, it's a healthy situation at Altnagelvin Hospital as they discharge their last COVID-19 patient from intensive care. We're back with you again shortly. Hello there once again, you're watching UTV Live at 6. A reminder of our top story. And the Taoiseach has announced plans to lift lockdown in the Republic. Shops will reopen on Monday, hotels and pubs by the end of the month, and finally hairdressers and nail bars by July 20th. Now, there have been celebrations at Altnagelvin Hospital in Londonderry, where the last coronavirus patient has been discharged from the intensive care unit. That means that the ICU there has a 100% COVID-19 survival rate. But, as Gareth Wilkinson reports, medical staff are warning the public against complacency.
Last month we brought you the story of COVID patient Danny Ogle, the hospital porter applauded by workmates as he left Altnagelvin's intensive care unit. Every other COVID patient that entered ICU here also came out.
Most important are our patients, and I think they were very determined. They wanted to get better, the resilience which the patients had, and it was very, very humbling for us to watch as staff, to see the fight they were giving to get themselves better. There's a lot of darkness, but there's always a light, and we should all have that hope, and that's a hope what gets us through all of those difficulties.
Coronavirus has claimed lives at Altnagelvin. The 12 patients treated in ICU were very ill. Some spent weeks on ventilators close to death, but they all went into recovery. What was it like that moment when you discharged your last COVID patient out of ICU?
So we planned it for a couple of days. We made sure that he was ready to go. We did have a party the day before, and he came out. We had a party, we FaceTimed his family. The staff really enjoyed it. We're absolutely delighted to have this figure of 100% success rate of patients being admitted to intensive care with COVID.
The patients that we did have were really very ill, and it was a very worrying time for staff, for patients and their families. It was very difficult because the families weren't able to come and visit their patients, which would have been part of our normal day-to-day work.
And did you feel then that in a way that you became the patient's family on the ward and in the ward?
Very much so. Our patients are very important to us. We do get ourselves very involved, and even now after the patients have left, we're still keeping in contact with them to see how they're doing.
COVID patients in ICU were treated in the so-called red zone. Today it's empty. Medical staff have praised the public. Lockdown helped keep numbers low, but they're warning against complacency. Do you fear a second wave?
Yes, I think everybody fears, and I think I'm no different. We still have to be very vigilant about this virus. As community, I think we still need to maintain the social distancing. We still need to understand that this virus has not gone away. It has faded, but at the same time it can resurface. So we have to be very, very mindful.
Their work is life-saving. Staff here deserve all the applause they get. Garth Wilkinson, UTV Live, Altnagelvin Hospital.
A very important message indeed, but what a good story. And can Aisling bring us some good news with the weather forecast?
Come rain, hail or shine, you can always rely on the good things in life. UTV Weather, sponsored by Phoenix Natural Gas.
A very good evening. Well, it's been quite a blustery day, and that blustery weather will continue all the way through to Saturday. Some very heavy rain tomorrow morning as well. Now, things will tend to settle down on Sunday. A drier day in store here, although a little bit cloudy, and then it'll be dry on Monday with a little bit more in the way of sunshine. But over the next few hours, those showers continue to pile in from the northwest. By the early hours of the morning, we'll have much heavier rain. A very cool start to the day as well. Lows of around 6 or 7 degrees Celsius. So a very windy day in store. Heavy rain in the morning, and then that will clear to leave some sunshine, but some blustery showers to follow on through as well, and perhaps the winds easing off just a notch by the late afternoon. Highs of around 13 degrees Celsius, so again another cool day. Now across the rest of Ireland, that early rain will also affect further areas down south, and then it's a day of sunshine and blustery showers for everyone. Highs of just 15 degrees Celsius. But as we head through the outlook, things will settle down, and slowly but surely temperatures will pop back up to average. Coming up next, your pollen forecast.
A grand day for new adventures. UTV Weather, sponsored by Phoenix Natural Gas.
Hay fever season is upon us. UTV Pollen Count is sponsored by Optrex Eye Care range.
Well, with some cooler weather around, the pollen count is moderate through Saturday, through Sunday and all the way through to Monday. Now, the main pollen at the moment is coming from grass pollen. Bye-bye.
Well, the ITV News continues in just a moment with Ranveer Singh, and Michelle Napier will be here with the late UTV Live at just before 11 tonight. Until then, from all of us in the newsroom, have a good evening and a great weekend, but remember, stay safe. Bye-bye.